Hi, welcome to our Mirror TV segment on the Penn State and Jerry Sandusky scandal. Corey Geiger along with Mirror Managing Editor Neil Riddell and General Manager Ray Eckenrode. Really sad times for Penn State football, for Penn State University. Neil, you've covered this football program for more than 3 decades. You've been around Joe Paterno as long as anyone. What is the black mark that this whole scandal is leaving on the program and the university?
I think it's indelible. I mean, I don't think in all of our lifetimes that, I mean, I think you're going to really have to be like maybe less than 10 years old to not remember this. I mean, it's going to be something that all of us remember for the rest of our lives. People have been following Penn State football and Joe career. You know, right now you have to be about 70 to remember Rip Engel. So, I mean, I think this is going to be something that anybody who has followed Penn State football who is more than 15 or 18 years old will never forget.
And let's mention this, most people, a lot of people rather, who have followed the Penn State football program for a long time very closely, they knew this was coming down. This wasn't a surprise. You've heard rumors and speculation about this for years. So we all kind of wondered what the impact would be, the total, the details, when the details come out. Right now that we know these details, are they even more shocking and sickening than you could have possibly imagined?
I think they're unfathomable. You know, I think you would have had a hard time finding, and you're right, we all knew it was coming. I think you would have had a hard time finding anyone who expected anything near this level. And that's hard to say when you're talking about child sexual abuse, but the extent of it, the number of victims, and the fact that some of the attacks allegedly occurred in Penn State's locker room, I think were the things that just took it beyond what anyone could fathom.
And the fact that Penn State was not aggressive in its reporting of this, didn't seek outside agencies, is really unconscionable. I mean, you have this is one of the great universities in our country, and to have managed this process like this, especially when they had previous evidence in 1998 that the district attorney in State College, Ray Griecar, had investigated. I mean, to me, the 2002 thing should have been absolutely the final straw of any involvement with him on the campus. Now again, these are all allegations and they haven't been proven yet.
And that is the thing. We have to wait for justice to prevail, for all the evidence to come out in the Jerry Sandusky situation. That's the legal situation. I think we all can agree in humanity it's just sickening and it's revolting to see these types of things come out. And I think we can all agree with that. And if indeed it's found that Jerry Sandusky committed these acts, then lock him up and throw away the key. If you don't, I would think most people would agree with that. The issue here, one other issue, is the scandal and the potential cover-up. And that, as Neil alluded to, there was an incident in 1998 that was investigated and dropped. Then there was the 2002 incident. Let's get into that, because I think that is really the key. The graduate assistant, most people probably know about now, it was Mike McQueary, who's the receivers coach. What did Mike McQueary know? Who did he tell? What did he tell to Joe Paterno? What did he tell to Tim Curley and Gary Schultz, as opposed to what he told Joe Paterno?
Well, according to the grand jury, he told them conflicting things, or at least it was interpreted as conflicting things, right?
Yeah, it was interpreted that way, but the grand jury presentment makes it very clear that they found McQueary's testimony to be credible, and they did not find Schultz or Curley's testimony to be credible. I mean, it is very clear on that point. What's interesting, if you read it, it describes the situation of McQueary telling Joe and McQueary telling the 2 administrators. It describes them differently. And you saw the prosecutor today refer 1,000,000 times in the press conference, I can only comment on what's in the presentment. The presentment says McQueary told Paterno what happened. That's what it says. It says he told the 2 administrators that he witnessed a sexual attack in a rape in the shower. The presentment makes that difference. It uses general wording in the statement to Paterno and specific wording in regard to the other interview.
And that's all very important based on Joe's statement Sunday afternoon saying that he wasn't aware of the severity of the allegations. So are we to believe then that Mike McQueary did not reveal all of the details of what he allegedly saw in the shower to Joe Paterno? Or are we to believe Joe Paterno could not hear them, did not want to hear them, dismissed them, or that Mike McQueary just didn't get all that involved with the details.
And that, as the DA said, you know, we can speculate. I would think that Joe knew the severity of it by the fact that McQueary was with his dad and they were at his house.
And McQueary was described as being distraught by multiple people described it that
So
way.
therein lies the issue, and this is what ultimately Penn State football, every discussion about Penn State football comes down to Joe Paterno. As Attorney General Linda Kelly said during her news conference today, there are differences between the legal side of this and the moral side of this, and she was asked a question about that. Legally, maybe Joe is okay and gets off on all this. Morally, what is Joe's responsibility to the university, to the young boy who may have been involved, to everyone involved when he hears this information, whatever he heard in 2002 from Mike McQueary?
Well, I think the fact that, I think morally they all failed based on what we know so far.
Yeah, and I think that's an important point. I think you can make an initial judgment that is certainly the case. I'm willing to wait and hear a little more of their side before we decide to what extent they failed. But I have a hard. I can envision this meeting happening and there being confusion about it. But I have a hard time envisioning that a week, 10 days later, that when still nothing had happened on it, that it was just allowed to go away. That's where I really have a hard time.
I would agree with that. And when you look back at '98, if you look at the testimony, Spanier, his testimony has a lot of holes in it, I thought. I mean, he couldn't identify the person that witnessed it, even though the guy's still on their staff. And that this came out in the Patriot News in March. Spanier was deposed in April, and he said that he didn't remember the '98 incident either. So I thought those were puzzling.
Maybe implied is a little too strong a word, but I think there were hints in that press conference that Dr. Spanier's on shakier ground legally than Joe Paterno.
Let's give a little bit of a visual element here if you can. Neil is my immediate superior. Ray is his superior. If I see a 10-year-old boy being raped on company grounds, I would tell Neil. But I can guarantee you that would not be the end of my involvement in it. I would make sure to stay involved, to see what's happening, maybe call the police. I definitely would call the police. But Joe Paterno did none of these things. He did not. He passed it to his superior, who then passed it to Tim Curley, and basically Joe Paterno washed his hands of it. And that is the underlying issue that I think a lot of people are having with Joe Paterno, who has built his career on this great legacy and integrity. He's an icon of humanity and everything with all he's done for the university, not just the football program, but by washing his hands of this situation and passing the buck, that is morally ambiguous as it gets.
I would agree with that. Now, one point is Sandusky was already retired from the football staff. So I think that plays into it a little bit. But surely if Joe would have called up Curley and said, hey, where does that thing stand? Have we reported that to the police? Have we called children and youth? We don't want this to come back. I mean, I think all of them in this case. Now, in '98, I think it's a little bit different because he's still on Joe's staff. But I think all of them are to blame. But Joe will get the most blame because he's the king.
The moral side, right?
Just one caution about the morality of it. And having been on the news side and dealt with these kind of things before, once you read that presentment, you can never look at the facts around this case the same way again. And you sort of have to remind yourself how this occurred chronologically, building up to what you read in that report. And so, you know, when you make your judgments about this kind of thing, try to frame it chronologically in terms of where they're at then. And I think you just made good points that way. Because knowing what we know now, the behavior of just about everyone involved is unfathomable. And you have the dynamic in this that unfortunately we've seen in other areas of society where an institution somehow becomes larger than the people involved in it.
You do the right thing. Life is about doing the right thing. And if Joe Paterno's integrity is what it is...
You do the right thing. People in the Catholic Church didn't do the right thing. The people in the Boy Scouts didn't do the right thing. You have this situation, and I'm not saying it's right, I'm just saying...
Do they have jobs? And that's the key question. Will Joe Paterno have a job when all is said and done with this? A lot of people thought that this was going to be his final year anyway. Now that you add this layer onto it, Neil, I've been asked by everybody today, as I'm sure you have, Does Joe Paterno survive this as the head coach at Penn State University?
Well, I mean, I thought this was going to be his last year anyway. You know, I don't know who else is going. I mean, is Curley going to be there? Right now, he's on a leave of absence indefinitely. We really don't know what's going to happen to Spanier. I mean, most people feel that, you know, they need to wipe the slate clean. You know, I don't know what's going to happen. I can't see Joe coming back just because he hasn't been able to coach the team. He hasn't been able to be on the field. I'm sure this is going to I think it's going to make him want to come back at least for next year and try to. But I don't know if I see that happening. I thought this week was going to be his last game, and now I don't think he has a lot more power. But I don't know who's going to make that decision and manage him.
I think that's a incredible point about this whole thing is you have this mess that needs to be cleaned up. I don't see how any of them can survive long term. To me, the question with Joe is, does he make it till the end of the season? Does he make it to the end of the bowl game? Depending on what happens. I think tomorrow's press conference will probably play a lot into how that plays out. But the whole structure of how these changes would be made is all at question. You know, you have a university president who's not maybe in a position to do it. An AD who may or may not be, you know, you're literally going to have to default to the board of trustees basically coming in and managing this thing on a day-to-day basis.
Which really could become a de facto search committee. Yeah. And they do have some football people on that if it comes to that. But I also wonder, you know, how do you feel if you're Pat Chambers? You were brought in by Spanier and Curley. You got a mountain to climb in Penn State basketball anyway. What does this do to the stain of Penn State, and will it be as attractive to any kind of succession?
Again, based on what we know now, I just don't see how Penn State can do anything to begin reclaiming its reputation until there's a clean sweep in not just the athletic department. I mean, I think eventually Spanier goes as well. I don't see how they can begin because it's going to take years to regain trust. Until there's a clean sweep.
Yeah, and closing thoughts real quickly for each of us. I agree with everything Ray said. I'm not sure that anybody survives this in leadership at Penn State because this is really just, it's sickening. It makes your stomach turn to read these accusations and to see that these men who are responsible for being leaders of young men and setting an example in life, to see how badly they mishandled this situation, including Joe Paterno. The buck doesn't stop by Joe Paterno passing it along to Tim Curley. He should have done more. He needed to do more. He should have followed up. He should not have allowed Jerry Sandusky to continue to come back and work out at the facilities and bring a child to a 2007 football practice, which is absolutely ludicrous. When he saw that and when Mike McQuarrie saw that, what should they have done at that point? Everyone dropped the ball here. They are all to be to blame. You know?
I would agree. I mean, I think it's a tragedy, but I think it's a tragedy most for these alleged victims. I mean, and I think, you know, we'll lose sight of that because of what will happen in the big picture to all the big names. It's certainly a tragedy to Sandusky and the legacy that has now crippled his career, and we'll see how it eventually pans out with Joe.
Right.
I want a little more information until I make specific judgments about people, but I don't think it's too far to say. You know, Penn State football became an institution that was larger than the university itself, larger than any of the individual people, basically became this juggernaut that protecting Joe and protecting that program became everyone's job number one, to the point of, you know, rational, good human beings acting in unfathomably irrational, immoral ways. You know, like I said, based on pending what we find out, but it certainly looks like a situation where, you know, the juggernaut that is Penn State football just got out of control, and you know, the real victims are the kids.
Very well said. For Ray Eckenrode, Neil Riddell, I'm Corey Geiger. Thanks for tuning in.